Welcome, everyone. Thanks so much for being here with us today. As I go through the beginning introduction, I would just love it if people would actually put into the chat where they are dialing in from, geographically speaking. It's always great to see where a bunch of folks are calling in from, and I would just love to see the variety of folks that we have on the call today. Thank you for joining today's discussion on closing the government tech talent gap. I'm your host, Mark Lerner, and I'm a fellow here at the Technology and Public Purpose Project at the Belfer Center. I've spent the last year researching government technology failures, why they happen, and what we can do to prevent them. In the past, we used to point to healthcare.gov as the standard example of a government technology failure. But this last year has unfortunately given us newer examples of public services failing due to technology issues. Unemployment insurance systems, vaccine registration websites, COVID-19 test data systems, cybersecurity breaches, and more. Across my research into root causes and solutions, one key pillar rose above all others: the need for our governments across all levels to hire experienced in-house technical talent. Based on my research, I'd even go as far as to say that building and maintaining a significant in-house technical workforce might be a silver bullet to the vast technology challenges the government faces. We've historically seen significant underinvestment in government technology talent, and while the tides are starting to turn, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. Joining me today for this panel discussion are three leaders at the forefront of doing this exact work. I couldn't be more excited to bring these great panelists together for this discussion today. And so without further ado, let me introduce them to you. Joining us today from here in DC, we have Keith Jones. Keith is the Chief Information Officer of the Department of State, having just been appointed to the position at the very start of the Biden-Harris administration. Keith has a long career in the federal government of over 36 years. He was previously at the Department of Homeland Security, specifically U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, where he served as acting CIO and principal deputy CIO. He and I actually worked together for a bit of time, and I'm excited to have him join us today. It's also great to have another native Angelino on the call. Keith, thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it. Really looking forward to this discussion. I think there's a lot to offer, a lot for us to really, dig our teeth into and just really let it resonate, and see where we can take this.
Absolutely. Also joining us today is Rob Schreiber from Virginia. Rob was recently appointed by the Biden-Harris administration as Associate Director of Employee Services at the Office of Personnel Management. He previously worked at OPM as a political appointee in the Obama-Biden administration, first as Deputy General Counsel and then as Assistant Director for National Healthcare Operations. As such, he was a key member of the White House team that implemented the Affordable Care Act. In his role as head of Employee Services, Rob leads the policy direction in designing, developing, implementing, and putting into use government-wide human resource programs, which of course touches all aspects of bridging this wide technical talent gap. Rob, I'm super glad to have you on the call with us today, and I'm eager to hear what you have to say.
Thanks so much, Mark. I'm really pleased to be joining you and Keith and Jen for this important discussion and talk about, where OPM thinks we can play a role to help address the challenges that you identified and with which I agree 100% up front. So thanks again for including me and looking forward to the discussion.
Great. And last but certainly not least, Jennifer Anastasov joins us from her home in the Bay Area. Jennifer is the founder and executive director of the Tech Talent Project, a nonprofit dedicated to increasing the ability of the US government to recruit modern technical leaders in order to achieve critical economic, policy, and human outcomes. Jennifer was a founding member of the US Digital Service at the White House and served as head of people there from 2014 to 2017. Increasing the team from just 3 folks to over 200, including hiring me there, and creating a diverse cross-functional pipeline of digital talent from around America into our federal government. She focuses on bringing together talent, innovation, and social change, and she loves building awesome teams. Jennifer, thank you so much for being with us today. Any conversation about government tech talent would be incomplete without your perspective.
Thank you so much, Mark. And I'm really excited to be on this Zoom, particularly with Keith and Rob and folks who are so critical, because I think often when we talk about innovation in government and when we talk about technical talent in government, we forget the fact that there are amazing folks in government who are deeply critical to ensuring that that we're all able to step up together. So I'm excited about this conversation.
Thanks. And before we dive in, just a couple quick notes to the audience, whom I just scrolled through the chat, and it is incredible to see people from not just around the country, but around the world. We will have time at the end of this discussion for a Q&A section. So please, please, please do drop questions into the Q&A box down below, and we will make sure to have some time to get to them later on. For now, though, we're going to start with some prepared questions of my own. And to kick us off, actually, Keith, I'll address this question to you, but of course, Rob, Jennifer, feel free to jump in as we go along. Keith, historically speaking, as I mentioned, government has generally underinvested in technical talent, and in some ways has potentially built an over-reliance on outsourced vendor-provided technical talent in its place. How might your programs and outcomes change if there were a more robust in-house technical workforce?
Thanks for that question. And for whatever reason, I got muted again, so I'm back. So thanks for that. Really, I mean, when you think about it, having and retaining a diverse and robust workforce is something that we can't often quantify or predict, right? The value comes from the unique contributions and perspective of others. You know, you get deep experience as well, and you can never know what breakthroughs you may have or miss, you know. So in that regard, I think from a mission mindset, and as I can go and reflect on 37 years of government prior to when I initially retired in 2018, I think about A76, which was where tech talent was more or less outsourced to industry. And everyone shifted towards, you know, in-house IT professionals being more of a project manager mindset. You only need to manage projects versus really, you know, staying ahead of the curve. Some individuals, you know, still kept ahead of the curve to keep in touch with what technology was going on. But then there's others that across government where just kind of like took a back seat. And then you started seeing like industry really, you know, getting the driver's seat, and projects were not being delivered. And a lot of the outcomes were, you know, poor program management, poor leadership for projects, you know, no synergy, expenditures going through the roof. I mean, that there in itself, you know, became problematic over time. But, you know, especially as I now sit in this chair here at the department, I mean, I'm looking to make sure we build cohesion within the department and, you know, really start shaping our workforce and sharpening the sword, if you will, you know, on individuals, building up our skill sets for our workforce such that, you know, when we're engaging with vendors, we're engaging with industry, we have the right talent at the table. So critically important, such that we're not being led down by, you know, one vendor's preference, because that's the, you know, and that's something that it's easy to fall into. So we really have to be mindful of that. I think being able to be responsive, and the one unique thing is being able to shift and navigate priorities. Things change all the time, and I think with internal to government, you know, we have to be nimble in that regard. And a lot of times on the industry side, it's hard. That's a gap where they don't understand those changes all the time. And so the workforce tends to take a step back and not deliver. And we're trying to change that mindset right now.
I think that's absolutely right. You mentioned a couple of other verticals that I've been researching as well, procurement and governance, as being two of these other large factors that, from my view, the more in-house technical talent that we can bring in, the more nimble it'll allow us to be, and the more effective it'll allow us to be in both of those areas, as well as in just implementing these sorts of services. Rob, Jen, anything that you want to add on top of that? How might you see a potential vision for where we could be?
Yeah, yeah, Mark, I'm happy to jump in and add there. I mean, I agree 100% with Keith comments and my own observation about the sort of the negative the negative implications of not having a strong in-house tech team. I think it stifles innovation. I think it weakens customer service, and I think it increases waste. And I'll talk about those three things just for a moment. When you work at an agency that's outsourced its IT, and you're getting creative and innovative ideas that come from the staff that you want to pursue, well, they're not in the budget. And maybe you can fight to get them into the budget, but that's probably a 2-year process, even if you're successful. And in the tech world, an idea today that you can't implement for 2 years, like that doesn't work, right? When you have an in-house team that supports program offices across the board, sure, there's demand to be managed, but it can be managed at an enterprise level, and you can put those resources on emerging needs and react quickly. I think that a related point is around customer service. We do the best we can as government officials to predict the impact of policies and where the customer service needs are going to be, but that's what it is, a prediction. And sometimes things happen that are outside of our control entirely. And so having an in-house team that can respond to emerging customer service needs is much better than trying to throw bodies at a manual process that just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And then finally, without a strong in-house team, what winds up happening is program offices are kind of going it on their own, right? Like they're figuring out what their needs are. They're using their budget to get the vendors in. And then you wind up with a scenario where, an agency is using 6 different collaboration tools that don't talk to one another because everybody's just kind of gone on their own and got what they need for their specific situation. So, that's a really important kind of like from a technical and leadership perspective, but also architecture and just people who can understand business requirements, understand what the industry offers, and come up with enterprise-wide solutions that are going to be more, not only more cost-effective, but also, more lasting over time. So that's my observations about the limitations of not having a strong in-house team.
I would just add to all of that. I think ultimately, a key thing that can happen when we have leaders and when we have folks in critical positions who understand technology is that people will expect our technology to work in government. That will be the default, right? That, oh, of course, if I'm going to go, I'll just do X, Y. If I'm going to go pay taxes, or I'm going to go to the DMV, even though we don't control the DMV. If I'm going to go, to the DMV, it'll just be an easy, quick thing. I'll just go online. I'll take care of X, Y, and Z. Or if I can't go online, someone can work with me quickly to do it because they're not spending all of their time on something else. So I think that's one critical piece, is that the future should be we just expect government technology to work for us, and that a key way to do that, and I think Rob started getting into this, which is, look, ultimately, when we're talking about making long-term and short-term decisions as well, having those who have public service as their main goal and who have deep technical knowledge in positions of leadership and in positions of decision-making, that's what's critical, right? Like it's great to have even the best technology, and even if everything was amazing, we have the best technology in the world in our government. If the people making decisions about that technology are not focused on the public service mission of our federal government, that's a problem, right? Because of the decisions being made, the people being impacted. So that's the second piece. So expectations would be that it would just work, that we'd be prioritizing public service. And I would actually say that ultimately, that as we're making decisions, that technologists and that these public service technologists, public interest technologists, that they're at the policy table to say at the beginning, hey, actually, that's not going to work. we can't do that. We can do this other thing that could work. Or if you choose to do this, significant numbers of people are going to be impacted very badly. Can we look at how we do that? So I think having folks at the table like Keith who can have those conversations is deeply critical. But it's not, Keith is an appointed person, which is awesome. Yay, go Keith. But what I would also say is, we also have to look at developing and supporting career paths within government for those folks who are technologists, because often, I've talked to so many people who are these great technologists in government who are trying to do their work, but it's kind of on the side, right? It's not necessarily a supported pathway to grow and ultimately become a technical leader. We need a strong technical pipeline in that way, both into civil service positions and to appointed positions. So it's sort of those expectations, prioritizing public service, having technologists at the policy table, supporting these career paths are all critical to actually delivering on the policies we talk about.
Absolutely.
If I may, Mark, I just want to add, I want to foot stomp on something that Robert shared there around the customer relationship and also collaboration. 2 points there. Coming here to the State Department, that's kind of like one of my priorities here. Is really building that customer centricity amongst how we interact with bureaus. So here, you have the Bureau of Information Resources Management. The CIO heads that up as the Assistant Secretary for the Bureau. But we provide service across 43 other bureaus in the department. And, for a lot of it, these bureaus are looking to us for leadership and guidance, and to set the policy, set the examples as we move into the entire technical framework of agile development, maturing in that space, maturing in getting to a DevOps environment. We have to be able to work in that regard and be there for our customers and lead them the right way, because like you said, they start building their own and it's trial and error, and then guess what you have? You have security vulnerabilities that get built in, and that takes us down another path. And then you think about collaboration tools. I mean, you're right, Rob, spot on. The fact that right now we have 4 collaboration tools, 4 enterprise collaboration tools, right? And so it's having those discussions to say, this is what makes sense, because in the meantime, you're driving up costs, right? And we need to curtail those costs and spend what we really need. And then just the last thing that I have to go back, something that directly relates to you, Mark, is it just reminded me of the transformation program that we both was exposed to. And issue there is where we turn the transformation program more or less over to a third-party integrator. The third-party integrator, we have millions of dollars of sunk costs that, we pivoted and had government as key integrator in order to make things happen. We brought in the likes of you all in digital services at the time to really help, had the in-house tech talent repositioned, trained up on how to deliver a lot of these things, and we became immediately successful, and we were able to deliver, and now we have that program reaching full operational capability back in fall of 2019. So over to you.
Yeah, we actually have a case study coming out on the ELIS, Electronic Immigration System Transformation Program, in the coming months. So watch out for that on the Belfer Center website. There's a couple of things that I wanted to touch on that everyone sort of mentioned real quickly. Everyone sort of mentioned this idea of the expectation of better service, of customer service. And Jennifer, I think that you put it really well when you said that people should just expect that services work, even if they are not necessarily a tech service, like you walk into a DMV, because it should be enabled by technology. The idea that tech is a means and better technical delivery is a means to better services is something that I've been toying around with quite a bit as this idea of a service-oriented government approach. And I think that absolutely focuses on the idea of having more in-house technical talent. And Keith, there was also something that was mentioned that reminded me of a conversation that you and I had recently about continuity. And we want to bring in people not just at the executive levels, appointees, but also people across the chain that can stay in their roles for longer. I know that you have a lot that you can say on that topic, which I look forward to you bringing up. Rob, I've got a question that I want to direct to you to start, which is, again, something that came up already, the hiring pipeline, the hiring process itself. Many people view the government hiring process as being one of the biggest blockers to consistently hiring quality technical talent. And I just want to open the floor to you a little bit to talk about whether or not you think this is true and what can we do about this, or what is being done to address that pipeline process.
So look, the problems with the federal hiring process are well documented, and they're real. The processes are generally well intentioned. The merit system principles that are at the core of the federal hiring system are critical to maintaining a nonpartisan career civil service. The veterans preference rules that are in place are absolutely essential to honoring the service of folks who have chosen to serve the country in that way. What's happened is over many years, the HR capacity of the federal government has been gutted, and the tools that have been adapted to address that haven't worked well. There can be a lot of focus on things called like hiring authorities, and the competitive process is the problem, and if we had more like direct hire authority and more exceptions to the regular rules, that would solve everything. The hiring authorities are important, but there's a whole like end-to-end process here that has to work all the way through. You've got to first clearly define what the qualifications are for the job, and our qualification standards, our classification system is somewhat outdated, so that can be an initial obstacle. It's also, that can't just be an HR job. You need to have subject matter experts that are participating along the way. So that starts with defining the qualifications. You need to recruit. Many agencies have very little recruiting budget or recruiting operation, and posting an announcement on USA Jobs is not recruiting. Especially as we look to improve diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility in the federal government. You can't do that unless you have a real recruiting strategy. What follows from the recruiting strategy then is you're getting applicants that come in, and all too often you are looking at a resume and doing like keyword searches or using these occupational questionnaires where, if you are familiar with government, you know that the only way you get through is if you rank yourself an expert in everything. And that's just not a good assessment tool. So then unfortunately what winds up happening is people start to get angry about veterans preference and say that veterans preference is blocking hiring. Well, the fact of the matter is that there hasn't been a good assessment process that has occurred. And if there were a really good competency-based assessment, then the folks that wound up at the top of that list would be well qualified for the job, and they'd be good fits. So, and that's not an easy fix, and that developing assessments can be expensive, and so that has kind of fallen by the wayside. I was involved, I guess it's 11 years ago now, in working on the hiring process under President Obama. And back at that time, in order to apply for most federal jobs, applicants had to complete really lengthy essays. They were called KSA essays, knowledge, skills, and abilities. And we got a lot of feedback that that's too much. You got to at least let somebody apply with a resume. I said, okay, we'll do that. But then nothing came in behind those knowledge, skills, and abilities essays that really allowed the team to assess the competencies of the people who are applying. So that's a big area where we need to make some progress. There are some promising things on the horizon. There have been some pilot projects under a program called the Subject Matter Expert Qualification Assessment, the awkward acronym SMEQA. But there have been some good results there where you've had subject matter experts involved at all of those steps in the process, including in reviewing resumes and conducting structured interviews. So all of that's important. The time to hire is important. It takes too long to get people into federal jobs, whether it's through the hiring process or through the background investigation to get a clearance. So all of these things need to be worked on. And so we are working on that, and we're looking at some potential interesting things specific to tech talent. Our director nominee, for example, was asked by senators for both parties at our confirmation hearing about cyber and what the strategy is around cyber. So that's obviously something OPM has been very involved in. We'll just pause right there. That's my initial reaction.
I see you got some SMEQA love in the chat. I want to give Jen and Keith an opportunity to respond. Any thoughts on Rob's comments, or maybe building on top of those? How might you see things that we can actually change in this process?
I would just throw out a couple of things. I was clapping during the subject matter expertise qualifications assessment commentary, because I think one of the key things we found when initially looking at what a process needs, or what specifically when I was at USDS with you, Mark, looking at what does a process need to be really effective, was number one, subject matter expertise review, and that can be done and through the pilots with the subject. I'm just going to keep saying subject matter expertise qualifications assessment because it's awkward. That seems like a great way to be able to do it through the current process. But also, and Rob brought this up, and I have to highlight it again, speed of hiring, but also experience of hiring, especially when you're coming from outside of government. The current processes very much support, or as any process in an industry would, it very much molds itself and is supportive of those who already know the process, right? And whether it be going in through USA Jobs, or whether it's easier if you know what's going on. And so really focusing on experience, and that includes speed of hiring, is something that's critical. I want to highlight one of the key things that at least I found while I was in government is, it's highlighting and thanking and engaging and providing positive reinforcement to those who spend every single day trying to make sure that they can hire effectively. One of the things that I found was, it was the case that those who were actually doing the hiring and those who were doing the security checking, there was a moment when we went to go thank those folks who had done some amazing work and show them who we had hired and what they had done. And they were so grateful. And I was horrified to find out that those folks we had spoken with had never heard anything positive from anyone who they had worked with, right? Not from, in terms of the program staff, or the staff who were actually making use of those hires. There wasn't that feedback loop to be able to say, thank you. All of the work that you're doing is doing X. And so that was just I think a critical thing in terms of, amazingly, the experiences got better after we were able to work together more closely. And then I would, the third piece in terms of building a pipeline, I would say there's the active recruiting that Rob had said, the post and pray is what we call the put stuff up on USA Jobs or wherever, and then hope that people apply. Post and pray is not an effective tool for building a diverse, robust, and amazing group of humans who are outside of your existing network. And so to add to that, I would say two things. One is, as we talk about building a pipeline, we have to highlight some of the programs that are actually bringing in people from, at an early stage technologists into the federal government. So I know Nick Sinai, who's at the Kennedy School, and others had worked on building the digital core, and something that is being explored right now. And that's really exciting, right? That there's a place, because I will tell you, there are so many people who've reached out to the Tech Talent Project, which is focused on senior level folks, and said, that's great. I'm ready to go into government. Where do I go? Right? And we have this moment right now from an operational perspective. This is our moonshot moment where we say, hey, there are amazing people at all levels of the spectrum who want to come in and serve. How do we help them? Digital core is a way to do it. The subject matter expert qualifications assessment is a way to do it. In addition to this active recruiting that we're still, years later trying to do for senior level and mid-level execs.
I actually think that we have Chris in the chat. Chris would love if you could post in the chat a link to your work. And I love the call out, Jennifer, on actually building out that tech talent pipeline. I just put out a blog post earlier this week that #1 item on it is that we have to build out the talent pipeline itself, because without the pipeline, we can't get anyone else coming in. And that includes the people that actually do the work. Keith?
Yeah, so I just want to, one of these things that I learned a while back is that at the end of the day, especially in the CIO's organization, we're actually running a business, from whether it's human capital, whether it's acquisition, whether it's software development, doing digital strategies, everything. It's the whole gamut, So we recruit individuals from all walks of life, in order to work in-house in this organization. One of the things that I noticed early on too, I've been through all these phases, not so much the phase of hiring, but having to be hired in that regard, but the phase of the recruitment, of trying to recruit the successful candidates, But the key thing there too is as we are recruiting, we need to make sure that we interview these individuals, that we stay connected with them, because we understand and we have to convey up front what the process is. There's been times where we've done recruitment fairs. We've had very successful recruitment fairs where we've, been able to onboard individuals pretty successfully, but it's still important to make sure that that hiring manager that they spoke to during that panel, or representative in that panel that they interviewed with, stays connected with them, because that translates into, this means something to them. I as a candidate, really, I am appreciated and they really want me. But when you recruit and you walk away from it and you say, oh, they'll be on board in whatever, well, then you get the disappointment of the individual's taking another job. Why? Because we haven't maintained that constant and consistent connection. It's so critically important. Here at the State Department, I'm looking at 2 different verticals for recruitment. One from the standard civil service pool, right? Whether it be a GS 1 to a GS 15, or even from a foreign service officer perspective. So, and I've been challenged, by the Hill and others to say, how do we really infuse the pipeline around recruiting for our foreign service officers? We have challenges on both sides. We want to try and get the best skill sets. We have to figure out exactly where the gaps are, where they're falling off. Kind of like, you have a person that wants to come in and deliver on the foreign mission, and they may not have the mindset of someone that wants to one day become an ambassador, but they're just they bring a level of technical expertise or engineering that would be useful for the diplomatic mission overseas. So those are things that we really have to start looking at. I think career development is hugely important, that we maintain focus on what the needs of individuals are, and we keep pushing them out to not to get just customary in-house training, but push them out to the experts in industry. Where things are really going on, where they learn. They go out to industry and spend, a day or 2, or even if they spend a month out there working with someone in industry to see how they do business, so they can bring that back into the organization and to continue to infuse that type of talent. The other thing is that around incentives, I think we've done a lot with incentives. The cyber incentive pay is one that we could point to help at least try and compete somewhat with private sector. Of course, there's a lot of different factors how you really look at that, because on paper you say, well, it's still quite not the same, but then there's benefits that you get that people forget about being a government employee. So I think, and just the whole retention aspect of it, making sure that, you know, we also invest in the development and future development of others, and that we take that seriously versus, okay, we got them and we're washing our hands of it, and they'll turn out to be good just one day. No, there's individuals. I mean, we have to be good mentors to people. We have to invest in our people and really recognize and reward, you know, at every opportunity, and don't take things for granted.
I couldn't agree more. And there's actually quite a lot of work being done in the public interest technology space to try and create these job descriptions, these career pathways for people that come into government, because right now there's just not a lot of opportunities for someone from an engineering or design background to actually come in. You know, everyone generally comes under the 2210 job description, but that doesn't fit everyone's job profile. You also mentioned incentives, and one of the things that I like to say frequently is that government has one of the best incentives of all, which is mission, right? When people want to have an impact, when people want to do build services that really help people that need it and deserve them, government is the place to come. And I think that especially over the last year, a lot more people have realized that that's what they want to do. And so we're seeing a lot more people looking for these opportunities, Jennifer, as you mentioned. And actually, Jennifer, I do want to come to you. We've already spent some time talking about a little bit about the hiring process itself. And if there's more to say about that, of course, you know, feel free to say more. But outside of that, how should government leaders in both tech and human capital positions, conveniently we have one from each on the call, aside from you, be working more closely together to address this tech talent gap?
So a couple of things I'll just say, for those who want to dive a little bit deeper, my colleague Jenny Smith and I worked with the Partnership for Public Service on something called Mobilizing Tech Talent in the federal government. So if folks wanted to dive in a little further there, you can see some recommendations like hiring senior level leaders who understand technology, et cetera. How can folks work closely together? I think part of it starts with a shared understanding. And I think one of the things that I've heard just over time, not from anyone in this particular call, but is this idea from whether it be political leaders or folks who are running programs or policies, this idea that technology is just a thing that it's an add-on, or it's something that you can come up with an idea, you can come up with an operations plan, a delivery plan, and you can just kind of toss it over the wall to the folks on the other side, and they'll just do that thing. And I think it's when we're talking about a scale of over 300 million people, at that point, technology is actually the foundation upon which you build delivery systems, right? You work with business processes, you know, technology encodes business processes, and something that came out in a book recently that I love, Power to the Public, you know, it basically said, you know, if you have bad systems and you have bad processes and then you encode them, then you have encoded and you have digitized, thank you, bad processes, right? This is true. And so we don't want to do that, right? And so, so a critical thing really is about folks being able to work together at the beginning of the process. It's about, you know, when I mentioned bringing technologists to the table, it's having Keith sit down with the leaders in, you know, hopefully someone from states here, but sit down, right, with leaders at state when you're talking about critical decisions that actually involve technology. And one of the challenges is knowing what that is. When are those opportunities that involve technology? And so it's really about, you know, I think there's bringing folks to the table. I would also say that part of what we all have to be at this point are storytellers to help folks connect the dots between, and by folks, I mean to help everyone who's leading every program connect the dots between, you know, what technologists do, what CIOs do, what CTOs do, and how that directly results and impacts the outcomes of what we want. So for example, making sure that our SNAP programs aren't held back because of serious technical technical issues, right? Like we want to be able to get money to the people who need it. And there are people who are working on that, right? But that's really critical. When it comes to technology and HR, I really think a huge part of it is working together. There's no reason why someone who's been in HR for a significant period of time in government is going to know the difference between a site reliability engineer and a DevOps person, or that there is really no big difference, right? Like, or that they came from different companies, right? Like, why would someone understand that? So, we spent, I remember at the digital service, a huge part of our time, once we actually had deep conversations with the folks that we were working with, we realized, oh, people don't understand what these jobs mean. And there's no reason why they would understand what those jobs mean and how that connects to what we're trying to do here. So we're going to take a significant amount of time and we're going to explain it to folks, because that's what's critical. And that's actually one thing I love about the subject matter expertise qualification assessment process, is actually that it requires folks to get together. Anything that requires folks to get together and to understand the processes are critical, because, and Rob, I'd be curious on your thoughts on this, thinking about when we talk about getting subject matter experts in and involving them in the process, that's huge. But if it's not connected, for example, if I'm someone who's working and I'm just kind of trying to do my job at an agency, and it's really hard to take that data and put it into my into my system, if it's hard to use, if it's hard to take the data from the back end of a process like that and actually put it into my tech system, I'm going to be less likely to want to do it, right? Like, it's just because there's so many hard things during the day that you have to work around. So I feel like the working together, it's about like, meeting together and figuring out what those challenges are early on. Since I called you out, maybe Rob.
Yeah, Rob, happy to have you respond to any of that. I also have my own follow-up question for the two of you, but I'll let you respond in your own way.
Yeah, so I mean, there's some things that came to mind when Jen was talking. One is, I mean, to the extent that a sale still has to be made to policymakers and program managers, that technology is not just a thing like that. I was hoping we were getting past that, and probably not. But let me just tell you what my experience is that gives me some hope. So there were a lot of us lawyers and policy folks and around the country that really cared about the Affordable Care Act, right? Like, really, from a policy perspective, thought it was a great thing and worked really hard for a long time to make it happen. And then folks, wound up in these positions where there are operational responsibilities. And when we experienced healthcare.gov going down, and the troubles that happened there, like, we had to learn pretty fast how to be able to talk to technologists and understand, the terminology, understand what the problems were and where we could intervene. And honestly, the continued existence of the program depended on that. And all these folks who had, and this was not me. I was late to the day in the healthcare world, but there were a lot of folks that had spent their careers to see something like the Affordable Care Act happen, and weren't going to allow it to just crash and burn because healthcare.gov wasn't working. And I just think that that's really valuable experience that we've been through. And I think the experience that you mentioned up front, Mark, about what happened with the unemployment systems this year, I mean, those were life and death, implications of, if people could have food or get their medicine if they weren't getting unemployment. And though I wasn't a part of that, I imagine there were a lot of really dedicated civil servants that were just working around the clock to try to figure it out. And so I think that mission commitment that we've talked about, and the experiences that we've seen, where these programs have really turned on being able to turn the technology around, I think it's a huge opportunity. I do. I think it's a big opportunity. I think that the leadership in government, I'm hopeful that they get it more than before, and understand the implications of treating it as something that's just to be done on the side. Another thing that I wanted to touch on was the discussion around the pipeline. And this kind of gets to part of what Jen was talking about. You know, there are a lot of vacancies in government agencies right now. And what this is anecdotal evidence that I'm hearing when I talk to our chief human capital officers. There's a lack of attention to a pipeline because the hiring managers are saying, I need a senior level person that can come in right now and wear 3 hats because I'm just down so much, like I can't afford to focus on a pipeline. And you know, that's very short-term thinking, right? I mean, I get it. Trust me, I got a lot coming at me in my job right now too, and I get it. But it's short-term thinking, and you know, we need to be focusing on as we're rebuilding the civil service, we need to rebuild it at all levels and rebuild that pipeline. And we need to make sure that our policies are such that it recognizes that, you know, people might come in and do a couple years in the government and then go do something else. And then they might want to come back. And when they come back, they don't want to be told, well, you left at a grade 9. That's all we can do is bring you back at a grade 9. You know, like, well, what about all this stuff I did in between? Isn't that valuable to you? Yeah, that's really valuable. So we got to make sure our policies are helping with that.
That's great to hear. That's great to hear. Keith?
Sure. I think for myself, I was very pleased when I came on board at state, and then once the secretary was confirmed, one of the first things he wanted to do was have a discussion around technology. You know, it was a very strong indicator. You know, and I can go reflect back on many years where those discussions really didn't exist. And as goes the top leadership of the department, as goes, you know, how you're looked at across the department. You know, technology and that the authority of the CIO here at Department of State is taken very seriously. You know, and while that's not to say there's no shadow IT, there is shadow IT, but it's up to us to provide those guardrails such that we don't have to deal with shadow IT. But with us being an enabler to mission and individuals recognizing that, I think things have changed. I mean, certainly if I go back 5 or 6 years ago at DHS, we were able to sit, you know, have those discussions with the human capital teams, sit with them and show them exactly, you know, we had 200 applicants that applied for this position. You provided us a certificate of 30 applicants. Out of these 30, we probably can use 3. You know, now let's pull that same applicant pool and let's have our SME sit with you, you know, and your folks and that's no fault of theirs, right? But sit with them and go through, because they don't understand necessarily the implications and what's being written on the resumes for that specific subject matter expertise, right? And we started doing that for highly critical, visible positions, you know, where anytime we and I want to say we as the CIO and deputy CIO, we designated an announcement as this is a key announcement for our organization. We would then ensure we lined up who the SME was going to be to participate in the initial screening. It wasn't about, we didn't want to get involved in any of the legality of the process, but making sure when there were questions being asked on whether do these individuals really qualify, we're right there versus them taking a guess at it. And that really changed the momentum and the type and the level of recruits we were able to bring through the door. I think also another indicator of how things are changing is that our participation in governance boards, you know, across not only the State Department, but in every government agency where the CIO has a seat at the table, which is so critical because, you know, we're making decisions and, you know, the business wants to look to the CIO, wants to look for, you know, what is there buy-in there, or are there challenges that we don't know about that we need to know about? Or in some cases, can you please provide us a representative to work with us in order to further our mission? So I think things are trending the right way, and I'll leave it at that. So
couldn't agree more. At this point, I'm actually going to invite Ana Solozano to join us to get to the Q&A portion. We'll see if we can get to a couple or a few of the questions that have been coming in. I can tell you right now that unfortunately, we're not going to be able to get to all of them. So what I'll do is I'll also drop my own email into the chat so that folks can email me directly and maybe we can start a conversation one-on-one later on. But for now, Ana, how about you lead us into the Q&A?
Yes. Thank you everyone for your questions. It's been a really engaging conversation, so I'm excited to be able to share some with our panelists. So one of the first questions we got was around how can we push for modern IT roles to be added to the federal classification standards? Many modern roles, particularly those in user experience design profession, for example, simply don't exist in the specifications. Because of that, we end up overusing series such as IT specialist. That was a question from Michael N. So opening up to the panelists if there's any response to that.
I mean, I can just start and say, yeah, we got work to do there. The classification system hasn't kept up with the jobs that the federal government is recruiting for. It can be a lengthy process to go through and classify new jobs. It often involves, you know, not only HR, but legal and everything else. But it's an exercise that has to happen. And really, I think this is the moment where I'll mention that I think the emerging from the pandemic is an opportunity to take a fresh look at some of these things. You know, the federal government is very resilient, and folks did an amazing job in transitioning, you know, in large measure to remote work and expanded telework without any notice. Flexibility around hours of work was a big deal. You know, people were trusted to get the job done while managing all the other things that they had to manage at home. And so I think when you talk about things like classification, I link it up because I think there is momentum behind, you know, not turning back the clock to February of 2020. There's a desire to look at how flexibility is played out, make sure that, you know, agencies continue to be able to, you know, use those flexibilities even when the public health emergency is over. And I just think it opens the door to like taking a fresh look at the classification system, you know, taking a look at other like long historic things in the federal government. There's been a lot of talk about the future of work for a long time, but no real forcing mechanism. And I think this might be potentially a forcing mechanism on some of these topics.
I do want to just add on to Rob's comment there. The fact that I think around and the question coming in, thanks for that. But I believe that around human-centered design and user experience, I believe I won't say we, but there was a PD, a position description that we call it here in government, created for that type of expertise. And it was first used within U.S. Digital Services. And I kind of know that firsthand because we leveraged that position description at USCIS to go out and try and recruit UXD, HCD specialists. So, and maybe Mark, I can try and see how we classified it. And it could have been still a 2210 with a parenthetical around user-centered design. So, but what I'll do is I'll see if I can find something out about it and share that with Mark, and that way you can have what you're looking for.
That would be great.
Great. So we're going to move on to a question from Sheila Campbell. So she says, in addition to attracting top IT talent, how can we build the digital and tech literacy of senior leadership so they have a better understanding of the value of technology to drive better delivery of citizen services? Should tech literacy be considered a core leadership competency in the same way that budgeting and personnel management are?
I mean, I would just jump in on that one and say yes at some levels. Like, look, when we talk about any major organization nowadays, and I think about it actually, you know, could someone could someone be a CEO of an organization and say, you know what, I'm not the finance person. So I don't really like read budget stuff or like really know numbers. So I have someone to do that for me and they can tell me about the numbers. That wouldn't be accepted, right? Because you're expected to have a basic working understanding of budget in order to be able to move forward. And I think we're coming to a point where that's something that is expected when we're talking about a 21st century agency, a 21st century organization broadly, is an organization where folks have enough knowledge, right, to be able to pull on the I'm going to pick on Keith, to pull in Keith at the right time, right, and not wait until it's too late, and that kind of thing. So I would say absolutely, it's critical. And we talk a little bit about this in Tech Talent for 21st Century Government, but really that it's not just about, the same way you can't outsource everything to folks outside government, you also can't outsource everything to the folks who are running the departments. And when it comes to technology, technology is the way we're reaching out to folks. It's the way they get paid.
Absolutely.
I think we have time to one more quick question. I found this question interesting because we've been talking about bringing tech talent inside, but this question is, what are your thoughts on upskilling existing employees and transition assistance? Where does that come in?
I mean, I think that's got to be an essential part of the program. And I think from what I can tell, experience in that area is somewhat limited. I have begun to learn about a successful upskilling, reskilling project that the IRS used when it was closing its submission processing centers. And they have successfully put folks through an academy and landed them into customer service positions where there is a real need for more resources. And there's a real career path around that too at the IRS. So they were able to take people mid-career, move them into jobs that have like a career ladder and a real progression, beyond from customer service, revenue officer, revenue agent up the chain at IRS. So I'm interested in learning more about that for sure. And I know that was a pretty intense, lengthy process. So there's questions about scalability and, best practices and all of that. I believe also that OMB was involved in some cybersecurity upskilling that happened during the last administration. So I'm learning about what has happened, what's been successful, what hasn't worked. But I think that's got to be a priority as part of the overall package here for rebuilding the civil service for sure.
I'll just jump in here because it really involves the IT workforce, right?
Absolutely.
And one of the things that I've noticed too is that, in the past, when there were tight budgets, what's the first thing that gets cut? Training, right? And as CIO and as leaders across the organization, you have to understand the impact when you take that lightly. And I've operated under the mantra probably for the last 6 to 8 years that we have to continue to invest in our workforce and establishing certain programs that leverages key skill sets that we want to push through the organization and where we want people to learn, having learning leaders, if you will, across the organization and recognizing and not forgetting about those that may not today, meet your requirement, but bringing them along, and there's always some that will not come along, and we have to deal with that a little bit differently, but certainly a continued investment in making sure we're recognizing the true needs, getting them out to the appropriate industry conferences, the exchange across government. I think that's improved of how we communicate even across government and department to department, and the opportunities that have been presented, and certainly where we are today, I think the entire aspect of being able to reach out to someone on Zoom or whatever platform to have really good discussions just like this, right? And we all learn from it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, I know that we are right on time, so that's all the time that we've got. I know there's other questions. There's been a lot of questions in the chat. I can't thank the audience enough for coming to join us, and of course, I want to thank our phenomenal panelists: Keith Jones from the Department of State, Rob Shriver from OPM, Jennifer Anastasoff from the Tech Talent Project, who have just been so great and are going to be shining examples of the leaders that we need to be following over the course of the next 4 years. Of course, I want to also thank Ana Sorozano, who has been a phenomenal research assistant and a rising star in this entire area and has put in a ton of work into this event. And again, thank you all for attending. If you have any additional questions or comments, please just shoot me an email. It's in the chat. And stay safe, everyone.